With reports coming out that the Raptors are likely to select their head coach in the next couple days, a major last-minute update has given some light in terms of who the Raptors might actually hire. So apparently, they're going after a few European tacticians that haven't really gotten light in recent weeks amongst Raptors media. So we'll break that down, including D'Angelo Russell being linked to the Toronto Raptors and a potential target we could have to fill the backup or, one of those guard positions on this team. So lots of stuff to break down. Without further ado, let's jump to the first topic of discussion. The first thing we're taking a look at is some last-minute Raptors coaching updates, regarding who could potentially be the coach of this team. Now, we broke it down yesterday, two finalists named to this team in Sergio Scariolo and as well as Jordi Fernandez. And those are still two of the favorites, but we have more reports coming out in terms of some other names that could still potentially be selected in these final stages. The Raptors narrow down their selection. And basically, coming from Basket News, one of the big European sort of hubs for NBA news or just basketball news in general, the Raptors have narrowed down their focus on 3 European tacticians to select one who will take their head coaching position. Obviously, 2 being the names I just mentioned, and the third being Darko Rajakovic, who, for people that don't know, he was brought up a little bit, but hasn't really been talked about much amongst Raptors media, Twitter, Reddit, in terms of as a legitimate selection, but he's a guy that's been an assistant coach for the Memphis Grizzlies in recent years, guided their resurgence with Taylor Jenkins heading to the bench there down in Memphis, and he has a pretty solid history, right? Coaching the Oklahoma City Thunder, those Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook teams, Durant left in 2016, so got them a couple years, those Russ squads. Then the Phoenix Suns team that ended up having that bubble resurgence, turned around their franchise, and then coach those Memphis Grizzlies, with John Morant, took that team that was rebuilding and then made them, while they haven't had a lot of playoff success, have certainly led that franchise into some glory years since the grit and grind days. So, Rajakovic, again, as a guy that's touted as one of those technicians, knows the basketball inside and out, and is a guy that I heard mentioned a little bit at the start of the process, but seemed like he fell out of the news a little bit. So it's interesting to see his name pop back up in the final stages of this coaching search. And Mark Stein also indicated that Kenny Atkinson is a guy that could be on the lookout for a Toronto Raptors coaching position, as Warriors assistant Kenny Atkinson is recently interviewed for the Raptors coaching vacancy. He wrote about other candidates and stuff. So Kenny Atkinson, I briefly touched on his name yesterday, but he is technically still in the running for this Raptors coaching spot. Again, for people that don't know, coached that Brooklyn Nets team that was in a pretty dire spot with no draft picks. D'Angelo Russell, who we're going to talk about, was picked up on sort of a salary dump. They acquired Brook Lopez in a weird deal there where Lonzo Ball stepped into the point guard position and led them to the playoffs, built a culture there in Brooklyn, which is something that we could really use being built up here in Toronto at least after this recent season, which it felt like there was some turmoil in the locker room. People weren't bought into what the Raptors are trying to do. So Kenny Atkinson is another name that I'd be pretty cool with being brought into this coaching search. So also briefly touch on that article. Steve Nash is a finalist as well, but that's already been discussed and talked about. But the final name is the name that I was really excited about back in 2018 when we hired Nick Nurse, or 2019, going in that 2018-2019 season. And he was my favorite. Riker and I were debating on these videos, and Nick Nurse was a candidate. Sarunas Jasikevicius was a candidate, and Messina was a candidate. And it seems like the Raptors are looking back to showing some interest to Sarunas Jasikevicius. I butchered his name just then when I said it. But for people that don't know, Jasikevicius, he's Lithuanian. He coached a club over there in Lithuania for multiple seasons. Gained a reputation as a very animated guy on the sideline. He played in the NBA. He's a European Hall of Fame basketball player. He's, had a storied basketball career. Then now is coaching down there over there in Barcelona. So is a guy that has a storied basketball playing history. NBA, or not NBA, basketball coaching, EuroLeague coaching experience, and is a guy that was, especially in 2018, regarded as one of the rising up-and-coming coaches that could potentially, take over the league with an unconventional style, right? Coming in, being very animated on the court, motivating left, right, and center, and had some schemes, tried out a lot of weird things, especially for those Lithuanian teams. We haven't heard a lot about him since he's gone to Barcelona, but, you did interview for that Memphis Grizzlies coaching position a couple years back, so he's a guy that's had his name in and out, and he's seems to be connected to Masai Ujiri. So don't be surprised. He's a name that would sort of come out of left field after all the reports and all the odds and all the stuff we've been covering over the last month, but don't be shocked to see Sarunas Jasikevicius end up sliding in for that coaching position, or maybe even as an assistant. Who really knows? But I doubt he'd leave a head coaching spot over in Europe to be an assistant, but we'll see what ends up happening on that front. It's definitely going to be a interesting selection, and out of all these names, I'm happy we're not taking anyone on the coaching carousel of NBA guys that have had minor success, but then some failures, and they bounce around from team to team and don't really get anything great out of any single team. So I'm happy we're going off the board, it seems like, with this coaching pick, and we'll see what ends up happening. But let me know in the comment section who your favorite is to be the next Raptors head coach. But the next thing we're taking a look at is D'Angelo Russell being linked to the Raptors once again. Now, about a week ago, we heard some rumors, some chatter that Fred VanVleet could be tied to the LA Lakers. There's a report indicating that the Lakers are interested in potentially bringing in Kyrie Irving or Fred VanVleet to fill that point guard spot. And Fred VanVleet, being a clutch client, is a guy that you could see slotting in with LeBron James. He's a guy that has a lot of respect across the NBA after winning an NBA championship, making an all-star team, being an all-undrafted player that really earned his spot in this league, and the top guard, the league guard on this Raptors squad, even though he's kind of underperformed in recent seasons. But we knew that if Fred VanVleet were to potentially go to the Lakers, it would have to be in a sign-and-trade. Apparently, that's what the Lakers are sort of searching for, as this report coming out now is indicating that the Lakers prefer to use D'Angelo Russell in a sign-and-trade, and Fred VanVleet has been linked. So basically, the Lakers' goal is to not bring back D'Angelo Russell because, as the player, his stats this season, right? 18 points per game, 3 rebounds, 6 assists. Sure, he was an all-star a few years ago as well. 40% from the three-point line is nice, but especially this year's playoffs, the performance that he showed in the conference finals, this guy was coming off the bench for Dennis Schroeder, who was a player that they picked up midway through last year. So even though, and picked him up off the buyout market, picked him up off, one of those spots there, not a keeper. Was it the buyout market? I know the Raptors were in contention to get Schroeder. I'm not actually sure when they ended up landing him. I'm trying to bring this off the top of my head. They got him at the end of the offseason last year. My brain is slipping right now. But as a buyout guy a couple years ago with the Rockets and all that sort of stuff. So that all to say, D'Angelo Russell had a poor conference finals this year, lost himself some serious money, and may have lost his spot with the LA Lakers. And rather than the Lakers trying to bring him back or let him walk for nothing, they want to use the larger salary he'll likely command and bring back another player. Be able to bring back a guy that's also going to be bringing in some decent money, whether it be Kyrie Irving or D'Angelo Russell. We've also heard some talk that Kyrie Irving does not have a handshake deal with the Dallas Mavericks, so there's no guarantees he's going to be going back there, even though other reports have contradicted that in previous weeks. So we'll see what ends up happening. Fred VanVleet, it feels like, has been linked to any single team with a point guard opening, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about Fred VanVleet returning to the Raptors, except Masai Ujiri being rotted that Fred wasn't a surefire thing to come back. So we'll see what ends up happening. I don't know where Fred VanVleet's going to go, but if he's on the way out, right, Fred VanVleet, I know a lot of people are roasting his season this year, but 19 points per game, 7 assists. The 3-point shooting is the real ugly blemish on this list compared to previous seasons and stuff. 1.8 steals per night. Regardless of what you want to say about him, the Raptors do not have a lot of guard depth. So without Fred VanVleet on this team, things could get really, really messy. And I don't think D'Angelo Russell's the answer to come in and start at point guard for us. Even though he's shooting better percentage from 3, he takes some ugly shots as well, especially with the games on the line. Doesn't really, it was cool that he was willing to come off the bench games in the LA in these playoffs, but I don't know. D'Lo's not the answer at the point guard position, at least in my opinion, unless we can get more out of him. But let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. But staying on the topic of point guards, there is a potential Raptors guard target. Now, we haven't been linked to him by any means, but he's a guy that's likely going to be on the move this offseason, and that is Peyton Pritchard. For people that don't know, he's a guy that is an absolute killer of the Toronto Raptors. Every time we play against him, he turns into prime Steph Curry, just draining threes left, right, and center, and maybe if he comes into Toronto, right, he could be doing that night in, night out. Well, we could wish. But Peyton Pritchard has made it clear he wants to be traded this offseason, and he's a guy that, sure, you look at his stats for this season, aren't that hot, right? 6 points per game. My green screen, you can see behind me. The jersey's getting blocked out, but 1.3 assists, 36% from behind the three-point line, but he wasn't offered a lot of run, especially since the Celtics acquired Malcolm Brogdon. They have Marcus Smart already on that team. Pritchard just wasn't given the opportunity to get much run there for the Celtics, and he's a guy that maybe in the similar vein of Malachi Flynn has shown some things when he gets. Flynn did in the Tampa Tank year, hasn't shown a lot since that point, but he's shown a lot when he's had his moments. He's a decent defender, even though he's a bit smaller and stuff, but I don't know. I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on Peyton Pritchard, especially if the price is low. He can knock down some threes. He can come in. We need to try to do something at the guard spot because the Raptors' current guard rotation is looking ugly if we don't do anything going into next season. But let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors news. You guys are the best to make it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.